Hello, everybody, and good morning. Hope everybody's having a good weekend so far. My name is Joseph Johnson. I am a staff member here at the Kendall Betts Horn Camp, and I am very happy to welcome you to another one of our Horn Camp Connects. Today, we will be talking with our new faculty members, and they will be interviewed by Peggy Moran, our executive director for the camp, as well as director of the School of Music at Indiana State University. So our three faculty members that will be interviewed today will be Lanette López Compton, the professor of horn at Oklahoma State University. She is a horn player in the Tulsa Opera, the Luminoso Quartet, and faculty at the Fresno Summer Orchestra Academy. We will also be talking with Alan Fogle, LA area studio player and Hollywood Bowl orchestra player. Aliyah Danielle, our independent performer, composer, producer, and educator, as well as a New York City-based freelancer. A couple of housekeeping things as we go through before we start our session. So everybody is able to hear the presentation. Everybody has been muted, and please stay muted for the duration of the session unless one of the presenters say that we can unmute ourselves. If you click on participants at the bottom of the screen, you should see a participant list pop up with your name at the top. If the name associated with your Zoom account is different from your own name, please click the blue More button next to your name, select Rename, and enter your name. If you would like to include your pronouns, you are more than welcome. If you click on Chat at the bottom of the screen, you should see the chat box appear. Comments posted in the chat are affected by the drop-down menu above the text box. Depending on, excuse me, your selection, your comments may be viewed by everyone or by individual participants. Each time that you enter a comment, please be sure you are sending it to the right person if you don't want everybody to be seeing it. And with that being said, Peggy, it is all yours, and we are very excited to hear from all of our faculty.
Thank you, Joe, so much. As Joe said, I echo that I am thrilled to have this conversation with three amazing players and amazing people. I feel so fortunate. I have known all three of these for a very long time and worked with them in many different capacities. And I'm so excited for the participants at KBHC this year to get to work with them. Kind of my plan for today is I'd like to talk to each of you separately, kind of about your philosophy and your teaching and your experience, but really also have a conversation, because I think one of the really powerful things about KBHC is how it brings horn players and horn teachers together. And it's that synergy that we have of all 50 participants and 14 faculty and 8 staff. That's really where so much of the magic happens. So I really want us to kind of converse with each other, even if we're kind of focusing on one at a time. And then I also want to talk about then, once we've delved into each of your own experiences, just about the camp experience, because each of you have a very different experience with camp. Alan has been a longtime participant and staff member and is now, we're thrilled. I know Bernard's been trying to get you on the faculty for a while. We're so thrilled it worked out this year. Aliyah started in 2019 and quickly became part of our leadership group, and she's now in charge of our digital initiatives and social media. And Lanette, you are brand new, but you've had students go, and of course, you've heard about it for a long time. So again, I think it'll be a really great conversation. And as well, please always put something in the chat if those of you who are joining us have questions as well. So Lanette, I've had the honor for the 12 years I spent in Oklahoma of being your colleague and friend, and seeing your amazing studio and just all the wonderful things that you do. And quite frankly, I'm really excited. I don't think we usually have 2 warm-ups. I think the day you do drop the beat, I don't think anybody's going to go to another warm-up. So can you just talk a little bit about your philosophy of teaching and your background and what you believe strongly in, and we're just really excited to have you at KBHC.
Thank you so much. I can't be more excited to be a part of this Horn family. Those of you who know me, I always say Horn fam or something like that, but I would say that probably if I were to say it, and I haven't said it like this before, um, the reason why I'm excited about this new venture for me, but also about my philosophy, is that really this is about community, right? And you guys have had and built such an amazing community of horn players, which are the best people ever. And I just can't wait to, I guess that's pretty much everything I do. You mentioned my drop the beat warm up. I try to spend as much time with all of my students during the day as possible. And we've kind of built that kind of community here, and I can't wait to bring that there. So we're all, as I look into my office, I see all the chairs and I see all the stands. And I just know that those times in the morning, early in the morning, um, there's a lot of laughing, there's a lot of just realness of just like, oh man, I just really messed up that scale. And and it's not anything that's intimidating, and we're all just there for each other and just challenging ourselves, but also just enjoying that time. Not only building, just the community, but also just what it takes to be a good horn player. And so that's kind of like as much as I can do that reminds us, especially after COVID, that we are a community, that we get to do these things together. I just want to cherish that all the time. And so that's kind of like what I kind of come from, like if we can build everything from playing in unison, then to playing in sections, like with quartets, sections, octets, horn ensemble, which is my passion, then, we can do pretty much anything, whether we're going to be a player, whether we're going to be a teacher, or just a lifelong horn community member. I think that all starts kind of right here in my studio. And so I can't wait to bring that and to be a part of something like this at Kendall Betts.
I really love that because I think sometimes we think about being a musician as sitting in a practice room by ourselves, right, and working away. And it's not that we don't have to do that, but I actually kind of got chills when you said it starts with playing in unison, because that is right. Everybody kind of connecting, and so I think that's yeah. It's really beautiful, and you're right. Like that's your philosophy, and it is also the philosophy of camp. So that's exciting.
Yeah, the one thing about that you were just reminding me of is just um, the one thing I like to tell my students is like in these rooms because they're different sets of students every morning. I'm like, I don't want you to sound like that person in particular, or even me. I was like, I want us to sound like each other. So whatever that creates is what I want it to be. And so that way nobody feels like I said nobody plays louder or softer than anybody else, especially in that unison. And so every once in a while when they kind of break out of that, I'll make a little sound. I'll go, and they'll be like, and then they notice and they kind of tune back in. I mean, it's early in the morning usually. And so yeah, so we're one voice, but we're different people trying to create that. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where the group is greater than the individual, right? It creates something. That's wonderful. Alan, why don't we kind of go to you for a few minutes just to talk about kind of, you are such an accomplished player as well as a teacher, and just kind of what your experience is and what you think about in terms of what we're bringing to camp this year.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I don't know if Peggy mentioned already, this my first year at camp, I think was 2001, maybe 2002. But it actually was the first time that I met Jay Greg. We were in a cabin together, so probably one of my oldest friends, and probably the same year I met you, Peggy, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Um, but one of the things that I'm really into, aside from playing horn, is riding bikes, and there's like a big community around that. That's one of my favorite things about it. And it's kind of neat, and I feel like there are all these parallels that you can draw between sort of like that community and horn playing, where it's like, if you want to be competitive about it, there's certainly an avenue for you to do that. But the things that I really like are the sort of community building aspects and recognizing that the thing that we're doing is a hard thing, and there's kind of a lot of rewards that come from doing that together that aren't you don't always think about at first. I remember when I was earlier on getting into biking, I remember there's an event coming up that I really wanted to do, but I was very intimidated by it because it was like a lot farther than I'd ever gone, and like up mountains, and I was like nervous that I either like wouldn't be able to do it, or that like my friends that I wanted to do with it are like, oh, they're like so much faster than I am. So I was worried that they're gonna have a bad time because I'm not as good as them, which might sound familiar to us as like horn players sometimes. And I had a really good buddy who told me this saying that really stuck with me for bikes especially, but also for horn playing, was that don't it's not about finding your community and your people who are the same ability level as you. It's about finding the people with the right attitude and like surround yourself with those people. And I think the more we can do that in the horn community, like playing horn is hard. Like I feel like I still most days don't know what I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. um but recognizing that and trying to like find people with a good attitude. And for me, that's what camp is all about, is you know we all come together because we enjoy this thing in our lives, but then also through that you get to meet a lot of really awesome people who are into a lot of other cool things that you get to share with each other, and it eliminates focusing on that aspect of like how good you feel that day or not. And I think the other thing that's really particularly exciting for me about camp is, again, I'll draw another parallel to riding bikes because it's like my other big hobby. But there's a certain feeling of accomplishment that you get when you do something for the first time that you were nervous about. Like, let's say, like play your first concerto, or you win an audition, or get first chair in your placement audition. Like, there's a really good feeling that comes from that sense of your work paying off and accomplishing something. But one thing that I think that's really cool, and you get to see this a lot at camp, which is really I think special because you don't have as many opportunities to do it, is a special feeling that you get when you see someone else get to have that experience. A lot of times, when I am riding with people who are riding bikes for the first time, and there's a lot of stuff that they think like, oh, I could never do that. Like, that's too far. Like, that's hill's too big or whatever. But then, you have a couple of people around them who are really encouraging them and saying like, yeah, like you might surprise yourself what you can do. And then to get to be there while that person is having that positive experience is also a positive experience for the audience and for the people who are there to support them. So I think it's an easy thing to not notice or to not think about, but I think that's what I really like to encourage people to do, is like enjoy the pleasure of like being happy for someone else and being there to know that like they're able to do that partially because you were able to support them. So that's, to me, like that's all the spirit of Horn Camp is all about. That is, getting getting to play a solo for the first time that they were nervous that they might not be able to do, and then having it go really great and get to be there for them for that is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I agree. I mean, Ellen and I go way back in terms of camp, and my first year was 96. So, which was the second year of camp. It's when I met Bernard Scully. So, when I met the artistic director, and Ellen was talking about meeting the president of our board, JG. And so, yeah, and that, actually brings up other things, which are the connections. But I agree, Ellen. I mean, every year people comment on how, again, we're a camp for all levels, high school, college, professionals, amateurs, all ages. And the support, people will say, wow, like it's so great how the high school students are really supporting the adults. And then the adults will say, or the high school students will say, it's so cool to have the adults, how supportive they are of us. And it's just, that's, what we foster at camp, and that it's really, and it's a special thing, and it's a place of community, and you get to make these amazing connections. So Aliyah, why don't you share a little bit? I think we're kind of on camp talk, but we can also delve into some of the awesome things that you're doing. I'm going to circle back to Lanette and Alan and make humble people brag about what they've accomplished. So.
Well, yeah, I guess staying on the camp topic. So I'm kind of the baby of the bunch here. I started as a camper in 2019. That was when I graduated from Arizona State with my bachelor's in music ed. And I'm like, what's the process? My life is so full of a lot of things. I guess like on the teaching side, what even prompted me to study music ed in undergrad was when I was in middle school, I had this band teacher that okay, confession time. I don't know if this is public knowledge, but I used to play the trumpet in middle school. Like, ooh, I made the switch to.
We're gonna, Joe, can you get Aliyah off?
But so I started playing the trumpet, and I was like pretty good at the trumpet for a 12-year-old, you know. My middle school, when I was going to 8th grade, my like local school district was trying this thing where they were combining high performing middle schools with low performing high schools to try to like get the scores of the high schools up. So when I was in 8th grade, my middle school combined with the high school, and so we had to start doing marching band. I started horn in 7th grade, but my band teacher was like, "Oh, there's no French horns in the marching band, so like just go play the trumpet again because like we're doing marching band." And at the time I didn't, you know, I didn't have the research skills to look up like what a mellophone was or anything like that. So I was just like, okay, like I'll go play the trumpet. And after we did that marching band season, because I was still better at the trumpet than all the other trumpet players, she didn't want me to switch back to horn after that. But I was really like into horn at that point and wanted to do horn. And so without getting too much into the details, there was this whole situation, very like unhealthy, like she was like had this Facebook page where she would just like talk like gossip about like preteens. It was very weird. But so like I was a victim of that like bullying. And I ended up having to leave band because it was just like my mom was like, "You're not like we're not doing this." So she like pulled me out of the class, and I had to do some like creative writing class, and I was like that was the moment where I was like, I need to be doing music because what am I writing stories about dogs for? Like what are we doing? That was kind of like the impetus to me, where at the time I was like 13, so I wasn't thinking about it that deeply. But actually when I was a junior in high school, that band director like suddenly like had a heart attack and died suddenly. And I hadn't like thought about that situation much until that point. And of course I was like older and starting to think about like what I wanted to study in school. And so I was like, this was a really formative experience for me. Like this educator really, I don't think I would have taken music as seriously as I had started to, like if that hadn't happened, albeit it was like a negative situation. But so that for me was like, I was like, if I'm able to create a positive impact as an educator, that was kind of like what led me to study music ed. So a lot of my like teaching philosophy, and I've taught like literally 2-year-olds to like adults. So I, you know, have a lot of experience working with different people, and something that is really important to me is just like meeting people where they are, understanding kind of what their individual and personal goals are, and trying to use all the different knowledge that I've gained to help them reach that, rather than kind of the prescriptive approach of like, you play horn, so here's Mozart and here's Koprosh and here's like, and those things are all very important, don't get me wrong, but a lot of my struggle coming up and studying was like I was interested in more than just classical music, and I didn't always have an outlet for that. And actually my TA in undergrad, Julie Bucksbaum, was Lanette's student, and I remember at some point she was like, "Do you know Lanette? Like she does this cool warm-up thing with like pop music." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So it's like kind of a cool connection there too. Lanette has also been very formative in my development as a horn player, and like helping me get out of that as well. So yeah, a lot of things. I don't know if we can get into more specifics, but that's kind of how I approach. And also just thinking of the horn, like the horn is an instrument, right? Like we're musicians first, and that's the way that we kind of amplify what we want to share. So especially my experience in grad school, like I studied with a piano player and a saxophone player and a trumpet player. So I was, you know, I'm responsible for making sure that I know how to like play the horn technically correctly, and they're helping me to make the music. And so I like to approach whenever I'm working with horn students, it's like, what are you trying to say? And then like, let's get the fundamentals and the foundation so that you're able to communicate what you want. And so that's very much how I approach it. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. The connections in the horn world are fun. And you might notice that Lanette is representing Aliyah's first album. Yep, and there we go. And I've got mine is for camp today. So well, let's get to some specifics. Like I said, you are all amazing people and players and have accomplished really impressive things, and you're all humble. And so I think I'm gonna have to pull out of you some of the things that we want, the people listening and the people coming to camp to kind of know about. So Lanette, I'd really like to dig in some to the Drop the Beat. If you could kind of talk through that, because I think that that's just, again, it's really special, and it's exciting, and it's one of many things that we could brag on you about.
Of course. I always like to start off by saying when I talk about this, I'm not a morning person. Um, and now I'm kind of known in the horn community for for something that happens really early in the morning. And I always want to say that it's kind of started mostly with my husband, who teaches trombone at Oklahoma State. He always did a group warm up and used, I think he uses now a drummer track. Our friend, Stockton Helbing, who's an incredible drummer, he has laid down a bunch of tracks for his routine. But now and before that he was using funk tracks, which is kind of cool. So I love pop music. I love really bad music. I always say that, but it's really cool, and also just doesn't get in the way of the other stuff because there's not a whole lot of like really intense chords, and it's just kind of straightforward. But anyway, we kind of just tried it one day in my studio, and we were doing a group warm up, and we're doing it with a metronome and doing the things, suffering together. And then we were like, why don't we try, with this one song, and so I pulled it up on YouTube because Spotify and that stuff didn't exist. And so I was like, okay, and watch the, commercial, whatever, the ad, and then started playing. A lot of stuff works really nicely tempo wise, to do scales and to do different patterns with that. And so that kind of exploded. And another Kendall Betts Horn Camp faculty member, Pat Hughes, I blame him. I like to blame him as many times as possible.
We blame Pat for as many things as we can.
Yeah, especially when it's not right here. That's good. But he came to do a residency at OSU. And I thought he was going to come in the morning to do a warm up of his with us. So we're all in my office at the time. And I'm like, we're just gonna kind of wait. Oh, I can't wait to see what Pat has what magic he has to bestow upon us for our warm up. And he was like, well, what are you guys gonna do? And I was like, we're waiting for you. He was like, no, I'm gonna do whatever you guys do. And I was like, so this is the first time somebody from outside the circle was gonna hear me do this. And I was like, and they even my students looked at me like, you're not about to do this in front of like the somebody that is your first mentor and friend and everything. So I did it. I was like, oh, well, here we go. And afterwards, when all the students left, he said, Lanette, I can't play all of that right now, but I'm looking around during that warm up and they're all doing it. Like, I'm like, oh, yeah. He was like, you have to show this to people. I said, no. So he and the IHS was going to be at North Texas, which was my alma mater. And he contacted my former teacher and said, oh, by the way, I didn't know this. He contacted my former teacher and told him, Lanette's going to do a warm up. She kind of explained it. And then my teacher didn't really understand. But then he contacted me and said, oh, by the way, I hear that you're going to be doing a warm up here at IHS. Patrick told me that. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was kind of like forced upon the world. And thankfully, a lot of people really enjoyed it, mostly because, again, it started with the community. And students, even though it's very overwhelming at first, we just do scale patterns, rhythmic scales, things out of Randy Faust's book, your standard 2-octave, 3-octave scales with arpeggios, tonguing exercises. I like to rotate them from different people's ideas of tonguing exercises. And sometimes I give them a choice. What are you doing today? Low, high, mid, and they all just respond like what they want. And then I pick the song that matches it. Now I have hundreds of songs that kind of go with that, different exercises. And sometimes I surprise them because I always say I'm way cooler than them. I don't know how I'm almost 50 and I'm still and so they'll just laugh at some of the things we pick, like, oh my gosh. And we do that together. And so in a way it's less intimidating. I always used to say it tricks them into doing this just really, and it tricks them into getting strong facility on the horn. But it's even made me better. So it's kind of cool to notice that, wow, just having that structure in there. It's hard to, obviously it's hard to get mad at your favorite song, but it's easy to get mad at the metronome, but it's the same thing. So I've incorporated that also early on with solos. Even Mozart has been played to Jason Derulo. It wasn't my choice,
Right.
but that worked. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, just getting us out of our heads, we're all there a little too much sometimes. And so now it's pretty awesome. Like when I do present this at an IHS, or Belgium was really fun because like in Belgium anything goes. And I was like, I can rock that playlist. And they was like, yeah. And and it's always again an instant community experience. Most people just laugh and are like, oh my gosh, skills and thirds. Skills and thirds are terrible until they're
But with accompaniment, it's better. I mean, I think I
yes.
just remember when I first realized kind of what you were doing and thinking how genius it was because, I mean, I feel like because it doesn't just, I mean, I mean, absolutely, it takes people out of their heads, it makes things more enjoyable, you're doing something rote, and so to have that engagement. But for me, the biggest thing that jumps out as me is the way that it develops a sense of timing. Without, yes, just a metronome, right? Because we know we can turn on the metronome and then we turn off the metronome. We don't necessarily have that within us. And so that's always been the biggest thing for me to see is just, wow, like doing that on a regular basis, how that just, you embody the rhythm, and how that, I mean, I just think that's fantastic. So,
Well, that's part of it, just kind of like the groove of it, and I
right.
still, and they know that I hear them. I'm like, and I'll just stop the track, sometimes. I'm like, the time has not stopped. It has always been going. I was like, we're not paying attention, and
Mhm.
I was like, I'd rather you play the notes, the wrong notes in time right now, because we're together, and so like, I mean, it's a whole thing about always listening to each other and always just kind of like holding ourselves accountable. Um, I always tell them, in horn choir or even in our warm-ups, I'm like, we need to be responsible for our time. And so, the whole time, if they start a piece of music, I always kind of, I drop the beat. I'll go 1, 3, and they know, even if they're talking, they're, having fun or whatever, the moment I say 1, 3, they're like, whoop, and they put their horns up. And then if it's a little bit off, I'm like, no. I was like, do you hear how we're a little bit late every time we get to the last note, and or so on and so forth? And they're really quick to have fun, but to stay engaged. And if they're not engaged, then I like to kind of go, intonation, and they're just like, oh, I go, do you hear our last note? Because you're ascending in the scale, we're going sharper and sharper. And so it's always 4 times a week at least, I have Fridays are my me time.
Good.
But I need that. But, I always tell Mike, I'm going to see you 4 to 5 or 4 to 6 hours a week. 2 of them, are in this. People used to say, well, now you have grad students, they can do that in the morning. I'm like, no, I need to play for me, but I also want to be a part. I want it to be my fault if that's not good. But it's the whole thing. Even having some of them, I haven't done it yet this year, but I have some of them count off the songs because even that's a skill.
Oh my God.
That's a little intimidating on like how to hear it, and to be able to do stuff like that. And so, a lot of responsibility, but all within, listening to, all kinds of like dirty loops or or Sam Smith, which is a favorite in our studio. And Katy Perry, we love us some Katy Perry in here, but
Nice.
yeah. And the new Weekend CD is what we've been jamming too. So yeah, but it's a whole thing, and it's, we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. I mean, I had to get over the fact, I know there's a lot of people in the classical community like, ugh, that music. I'm like, well, that's just unfortunate because there's a whole bunch of music that you can have fun to and listen to. You don't have to like it, but I like really, it makes me happy. And I dig it and it works. And so, um,
And it's music. And
yes.
I really think that, the three of you here really show how important being open to genre and, just open to music is so important. And again, I would say, when it comes to drop the beat, I mean, I know we all kind of face this with working with our students is trying to find a way of habiting things in them. Because yes, there's repetition and yes, we need to make sure it's right. But yeah, I mean, when you were talking about, I'd rather have, I'd rather have the right time than the wrong, or the wrong notes in the right time. And it's one of those things we say, but it's so hard to get them to practice that. And so that's the other, I mean, there's so many powerful things in what you do. And I think that practicing of it means that, yes, you're in a recording studio and you're going for the, the timing. And so, and yes, that's a segue. Um, because I didn't actually mean to do that, but um, but I did want to kind of come to Alan and talk about your experience. You are a studio player right now, and I have to say, I think the most common thing I've heard from students is not I want to play in an orchestra, it's I want to play in the studios. And I know with anything that we do in the music world, there's just, it's not always, it's not a we get a degree and we get this job kind of thing. So, again, I know your path was intertwined with KBHC in a lot of ways. And and I think that had an impact on where you went to school, and it would be great to kind of hear hear your path to LA, and then maybe just, I know that you're not someone who touts all the films that you have credits on, but maybe tell us a few of the the movies that you've been on, and maybe some stories too about doing the studio work.
Sure. So my sort of path, I would say, started when I was in, I think 8th grade is actually when I first met my first private teacher. One of my best friends at school played trumpet, and his dad was a trumpet player in the army band, and so a very musical family. And his cousin, a guy named Darren Washington. Darren was at the time a DMA student. Well, no, I think master's student, and then he went on to do his DMA later. But he was a master's student at UGA, actually, studying with Dr. Martin Williams. And so I got put in touch with him, and just a wonderful teacher all through high school. And one of my favorite things that he did as a teacher, which I like to do with my private students, is every week I'd have a listening assignment. So at that time it meant, he'd usually bring a CD for me for the week, and it would be all sorts of stuff, but you might have a Mahler symphony one week or a jazz record the next week. And I'd have to come back the next week and at least be able to talk about what I listened to for a couple minutes. Talk about what did you like, what did you not like, if you didn't like it, why. But I had to be able to like talk about it in a way that convinced him that I had actually listened to it, which I always did anyways. But he was a really big film music fan. I mean, being horn players, of course, like there's a lot of good stuff there. So I'd say probably I got more film music listening assignments from him than just about any other genre, which was really cool. And that's what sort of got me interested in the idea of doing that. And then I remember, I think I went to KBHC twice in high school, and I think the second time I went, another one of my teachers, Jim Thatcher, was on faculty that time that I went. And so I was just, I knew who he was at that point, and was just like, oh, so cool, like to get to meet this person who played all these solos that I listened to. And then I went to college, and for grad schools, I was I knew that I wanted to wind up in a city where I could do some freelance work if I didn't have like a job lined up otherwise. So it was sort of like thinking big city like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago kind of places. And I wound up getting the best scholarship offer from USC, where Mr. Thatcher had just happened to had just started teaching there maybe like a year or two before. So I was like, oh man, this is perfect, stars aligned and everything. So that's what brought me out to Los Angeles, and I started there in 2008, and then just sort of have stuck around there ever since. And I think it's really fascinating that you guys are talking so much about time earlier. One of my favorite things about getting to work out here is, yeah, we get to do the kinds of music that you think of when you think of like cool French horn film music and sort of stuff. But actually, like the vast majority of stuff we get to do is not that kind of stuff. That's probably, I mean, we definitely get to do a fair bit of that, but there's a lot of stuff that is like recorded music or film music that you know, it's like the stuff that doesn't stick in your memory, but still needs to be there, like underneath when people are just talking in the movie, so you'll have whole notes. But a cool thing that I've appreciated is the sort of variety of different styles we get asked to play in a lot of times, and you know, everything from jazz to pop stuff to commercial to, you know, every genre you can think about. But the thing that, especially as horn players, I feel like we get really well versed in that kind of classical style. Like everyone can envision the character of like a Strauss tone poem, like the kind of heroic sort of thing. But it's a totally other thing to try to like fit in correctly with a big band or with like a pop chart. There's like a whole different like brain mode you have to be in to make it sound right. Because I think you know, we're all very familiar with if you ever like been in a setting where I mean, I've done this myself, but like where you feel like you're the horn player trying to fit into like the jazz band setting or something, and even when it's like you're getting all the notes right, like the character and the style isn't quite right. It like it feels very square, for lack of a better way of putting it. I have a lot of friends out here, especially trumpet and trombone players, who have to be really good at sort of like jumping back and forth between like being able to sound like you're playing in a symphony orchestra, but and then sometimes on the same job, you know, swapping modes to be very like commercial like sounding. And so we'll have conversations with them all the time about like, well, how do you do that? Like, and I think a big thing, and Lanette, you'll totally understand this, is for especially for more commercial styles, like the, you know, when we think of like the as classical horn players, like what's the thing that we usually think of as like the thing that always strive towards making a good tone, like tone and like a good sound is like the thing that all other things sort of fall behind. Other things are important too, but you know, you're first striving to make the best sound you can, and then you also want that to be in tune and in time and all those other things. But that's at the front of your mind. But I learned really quickly for you know, jazz and commercial styles, not that having a good sound isn't important, but the thing that sort of takes place of being the top priority is that idea of like good time, because it's like you can have like a really beautiful sound, but if it's late, it doesn't fit in well. It's not in the pocket, or if it's early, if it's rushing, that's kind of less common for horn players, but but it's still, you know, that, you know, that's the sort of thing that exists in the primary role there. So having to learn that and learn how to develop skills and learn from other instruments who have ways of thinking about these for like immediacy of making something happen now, like right, you know, right exactly when you want it to, and sort of making like there's certain willpower involved in making that happen, which did not come naturally to me as a horn player, but I, you know, I've had to practice it a lot, and I definitely feel like there are things you can do to get better at that. Like oddly enough, I feel like a lot of the Caruso exercises are kind of good for that. Just, you know, really that immediacy of like boom, like making things happen right when you want them to is really cool and important. But so okay, so to go back to the studio stuff, another thing that we have a lot of help with for a good time is click tracks. So like, a lot of times, like the sort of classic image of a studio musician is we have these one-sided headphones that are like really big, but they only cover up one ear. And that inside of that, we're plugged into this system so that everyone in the room basically has like the same metronome going in their head, so everyone can play together. One, it helps line things up, so if they need to edit things, like the tempo is always the same from one take to the next. But also a lot of times some of the big scoring stages we do, like we're spread out like way bigger than you would be on any orchestra stage. So we're very far away. Like we're usually on the other side of the room of the trumpets and trombones. And if we were, trying to, already on like a regular stage, trying to listen across the stage can be hard. But so there would be no way that we could do that there and have it like really be synced up well. So we have that, but it's very important that you have to be like right on the metronome. And one of the things that's also was tricky for me to learn is like how to like be in time, but also be expressive, because I think there's a kind of weird gray area that can kind of exist where you want to not play so like vertically and like robotically, but you also can't take so much time that it stretches the time and isn't like in line with what everyone else is doing, which is not just something that applies to what I do. Like there's a lot of the really great soloists, and like when you think of good soloists within an orchestra or an ensemble, they're really good at that ability to kind of be just outside of time, but while still being in time. It's a weird concept to describe, but if you like, when you hear it. So we had practiced that, and I guess to like, I'm trying to think of like stories that you mentioned.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I feel really lucky to like when I came out here, I got involved. We had a version, well, at the time we had a version of like the Chicago Civic Orchestra called the American Youth Symphony, where it was like a kind of pre-professional group where you had to audition for it and you would get like a little stipend. Wasn't enough to live off of, but you got to play some really good repertoire and get a lot of learning experiences. So I joined that when I first moved out here, and it was there at the same time as Annie Bosler, and I know a lot of people know Annie. I played third, and she played fourth, and then Dylan Hart, her husband, was playing first when I first joined the orchestra, and so we like all got to know each other that way.
What a rock star!
Yeah, no, it's looking that way. And Katie Ferrado was the second horn player at the time, if anyone knows Katie. But we're all like still out in Los Angeles, freelance working together. It's really cool. But so that's kind of how I got to know a lot of people I still work with. And for anyone who's trying to get involved in freelance in any city, it's basically just a commitment to networking and those kind of skills. Oh yeah, Aliyah says she knows Katie. Yeah, Katie's the best. But like building a freelance career is all, knowing how to be reliable. I remember one of the other things that I was thinking of, Lanette, when you were talking, but the importance of gosh, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase it, but because as a freelancer, like you often don't know your schedule ahead of time like you would in like a regular orchestra job. So it's not always the easiest to prepare or to like, to know how to structure your practice. Like, okay, if I know I've got a Brandenburg concerto coming up in a few weeks, like there's a certain type of stuff that I'm going to practice that's going to be different if I'm playing something else. But especially for the studio recording stuff, like we have no idea what we're going to be playing ahead of time pretty much ever. So you just kind of have to be generally well versed in like most aspects of your horn so you can kind of get through it. I like to think of it as I'm a new parent too. So there's kind of a lot of people told us like, well, if you wait till you're ready, like you're never going to do it. So just sort of do it and you kind of just make it work. And I feel like there's a lot of that to a successful freelance career. So like if you're able to be reliable and like keep a good date book and those sorts of things, it's all about just being comfortable, feeling kind of like as a parent, like I always feel like you're operating with like a certain base level of always a little more tired than you want to be. I feel like being a good freelancer is always being comfortable with feeling like a little less prepared than you would like to be, but still being able to kind of make it work.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of that. And luckily I've got the opportunity to work with a lot of fun people. I mean, I didn't really get to have like direct interactions, but like Elton John and Lady Gaga, like getting to play for their records, and like one of the biggest dreams of mine is, especially for a lot of people, is getting to work in some capacity for John Williams. And I was, he's getting older, so I was worried that there wasn't going to be the chance before he sort of finally retired. But thankfully, like a couple of years ago, I got to do that for the first time, and it was a experience of a lifetime, like definite, high point in the career and everything. I feel very lucky and fortunate to have had a lot of those cool opportunities, and I think that I'm grateful to be lucky enough to get to do this for a living and get to be able to play the horn for a living. So yeah, and I hopefully I can share whatever helpful bits that I can when we're at camp. Like I said, I always feel like most of my life is having a week where I feel like I have a eureka moment, followed by a month of doubt and feeling like I don't know anything. So.
Well, that's part of the community, right? That we all go,
Yes.
oh yeah, we feel like that too.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting because, with different paths, there are different kind of strengths that we have to build on, but also there's so much the same, right? And so it's like, I know um, one of the skills you have to have as a freelancer is to be a good colleague. And I think everyone can tell right now by just the way that Alan talks is what a good colleague he is. And, and I think that can be something that we forget, and we might think, oh, well, we need to be cutthroat, or this is it. And for any younger students who feel like that, I think it's a relief in a lot of ways. I remember thinking like, oh wow, being a good person is a job skill, that's exciting. But it's just a good thing to remember that yes, we work on all these skills of playing, but yeah, it's about so much, I think, especially with freelancing, but with everything, just being a good colleague is a good skill for that. So I appreciate you so much, Alan. I appreciate all of you. Aliyah, speaking of fun, I know sometimes it's stressful, but I think about your path, and I think about just how all the amazing things you've done. And we're all, you said you're the young one here, so I can say all the amazing things you've done in a very short time. I can say that even if you feel like and so I think about when I met you at the end of your college career, and I remember you were going on tour, right?
Yeah, so I was preparing to go, well, kind of. So this was like maybe 8 months before the pandemic happened. So I was, having that like post grad quarter life crisis, hopefully pre-quarter, hopefully I'm a little longer than that. But so Horn Camp actually came at a time because I was doing music ed, and I've had a lot of things happen to me. I was in a pretty bad car accident during undergrad that made me realize I was totally fine, but it was really scary, and it made me think about the way I was being trained to be like a public school like K-12 music educator, and very early on I could tell that that was just not like congruent with how I like my energy level, how I wanted to be like spending my time and stuff like that. But there was really no flexibility in the curriculum to be able to understand to like teach at somewhere like KBHC, or teach like in the community music schools, or like things like that felt a little bit more like what I wanted to be doing. So about halfway through, I just started leaning more into I started doing more arranging, like leaning into more performing, just trying to take as many opportunities as I could to um, like obviously I was doing the degree. I was like, well, I've completed too many credits of this, like I'm gonna finish it out. But I like added a minor, and like started trying to do other things just to like diversify and not kind of put myself in a box, because I was like, well, my car was upside down and that was really scary. So who knows what could have like, what that could have turned into. So it was kind of like a wake up call in that way. But yes, so I did camp, and then I taught for a semester, and in an elementary school, a K through 6, and I was taking a sabbatical to go on this tour. But I was really glad the pandemic happened because I just emailed them. I was like, oh no, pandemic, I have to quit my job, boo-hoo. But I was gonna quit anyway. But yeah, so the tour was with a group called Up With People. It's like a civic service, and there's another one. It's like youth change agent, like civic service, community development type organization. So um, the group will come together. I want to say our cast was about 120 people from like maybe like 15 to 20 countries. I don't remember how much, but it's
Awesome.
like a really nice like global group of people from, I believe the ages are 18 to 29. And I mean, it's since kind of like paused. Obviously, travel has changed a lot since then. So it looks a lot different now. But so we met up. We spent about a month in Denver, is where their headquarters is, kind of staging this show. And the music in the show talks about like different issues. So there's a song like about climate change. There's a song about like racism. There's a song about like gender equality, like different things that are kind of happening, still happening, obviously. But so the songs are meant to reflect kind of the things that are on the minds of the youth and the people that the youth interact with, which is everybody. So I was singing in the show actually and did a little bit of horn playing. But so we staged that. We got to like 2 cities and then they were like, oh no, coronavirus. And then everybody got sent home. So that was what I was doing then. And then I ended up staying at home I went back to Wisconsin for maybe like a year and a half. And in that time, I was working at a daycare. Never work at a daycare during a pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
I'll say it was like, yeah, I learned a lot about myself.
I say I have the highest regard for people who work in daycares, but yeah, daycare during a pandemic, yeah, that's
Like imagine trying to like keep like 22-year-olds to keep a mask on. Like it just doesn't. Like you just hope and pray that you're not going to get sick. Um, but in the midst of all of that, I was started applying to grad school. So I got into Berkeley, Valencia during that time. And in 2021 is when I went over there. Um, my degree there was in contemporary performance and production. So I got to branch out and study basically every other genre except for classical music there. And also got a lot of experience in the studio, both like recording in the studio and also being in the control room. So being the producer and kind of helping out on the engineering and the creative side on that side, which is a whole other thing. I'm actually in the middle of a recording project right now, so it's like fun to kind of exercise that part of my brain again. But yeah, I don't know if you have other specific questions. I don't want to ramble.
no, it's great. And one of the things that I love, and I think, one of the things that I feel like you did is really look at your path and figure out what you needed, and you found it in a place that maybe wouldn't normally like kind of catch the eye of a horn player, right? So like Berkeley is not, kind of a place that we classical horn players might think of, and just the fact that yes, I mean, and I think kind of encouraging people to realize that like yes, like if this is something that you're interested in doing, there isn't, there isn't some hold on us because we're horn players. And it's interesting because I think since you've gone, I feel like there's more horn players who I think they're kind of realizing it by your example. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit? So Lanette has your first album on on her sweatshirt, and of course last year at the Mid-South Conference we got to hear a lot of it. Yep, right up there. And I know you're working on a second one, and so just kind of I'd love to hear your and I've heard you speak about this in your performances, kind of your like what you're kind of saying through your music, and what kind of you're listening to your voice and bringing it to us in your authentic way. And I think again that's such a great example for all of us and all horn players of any age or ambition. So yeah, anything you could talk about with your albums.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, I always try to be super, super transparent and super authentic. I think, especially for my generation in particular, I'm kind of like on the cusp of millennial Gen Z. I'm like very late millennial, kind of early. I don't know. I'm in the middle region, but I think especially, we all grew up in the age of social media, so there's this huge pressure of like we're only sharing, the good points of like I didn't
Mhm.
post about my car accident online, right? But so I
Yes.
think there's always this pressure about just like you think you're behind or you think you're not as good as people. This like constant comparison, and so I try to be um open about that in the way that I present myself, in the way that I like choose the music I perform. I think a lot of times I like to let the music speak for itself. I'm not a super like preachy person, but I do like to, if I'm singing like a song or if I'm playing a song, it is very intentional. I choose, like the composers that I choose to commission, for example, is very intentional. I'm trying to, represent people who don't often get the whole like Mozart is Dead commissioning project that I'm working on is, all what you would consider different areas of like underrepresented composers.
Can you tell us who you're commissioning for that? Because I know you're writing some stuff too, right? Or are you just,
Yeah,
or is it all commissioning?
separate. My brain is like in 5 million different
Fair
places.
enough.
So that one, I started Mozart is Dead in 2022, I think. So I started with 3 pieces. The first one is by Shanice Strickland, who's also on faculty. And so that one's called the Funky French Horn with an O, so like Fonky. And yeah, I premiered that at Mid South last year, and
Yeah.
it's really nuts. It was crazy. She was maybe like 2 weeks before Mid South, and I was like, "You think I can learn this?" But it was a lot of fun, and like people really enjoyed it. And there was Shanice is really great at low horn. That's like I can play low horn. That's not really my bag, but there's this one part she wrote this little cadenza, and there's a low A in it, and I like missed it and I have my clip-on mic because we're playing with drums and guitar and stuff like that. And so at Mid South, I like was trying to play down to this low A and I missed it. And I was just like, oh man. And everybody was like, and then I tried it again and I played it and everybody was like, yeah. And it was just like a lot of fun, like back to the community thing, it's like we all get that this is a hard instrument and sometimes I'm gonna miss notes. And it was just like really fun and like the energy was great. So that was one. There's another one, this young composer, Richard Paris Scott, based out of a city near Boston. They're a non-binary composer and actually doesn't have any like formal composition experience. Like they just taught themselves to compose, and it's a great piece. It's a mixture of this kind of like trap sound, and there's also a little bit of a swing influence, and it's really cool. So there's that one, and then Marcus Norris is a composer based out of LA. Actually, I don't know if you've heard of him, Alan. He runs a group called Southside Symphony, and so he wrote me a piece called Finding My Way Back. And it's like a horn and track. I actually performed it at camp last year. So
Yeah.
like a really good mixture of like different genres, like different calling for different things. And part of why I wanted to do part of why it's called Mozart is Dead is because I think that we use Mozart as a training tool, which is really great. And I like the Mozart concertos. I don't play them voluntarily, but I think they're good for what we use them for. But I think that there's also so many other skills that we kind of overlook. And so the goal with this commissioning project, and hopefully it'll just be like ongoing until I run out of money, which is like every week. But but just so that we have more options of like if there's the B flat scale that I'm trying to get, it's like I can play a ton of other things besides Mozart that can get me to do that. Or if there's like different technical skills and things. So just kind of expanding the repertoire, and also to help people outside of the horn world see the horn as more than an instrument that can only play that. Because even in the musician community, I'll like introduce myself to people as a horn player, and they're like, oh, do you like play orchestra? And I'm like, sometimes, like actually not most of the time, but so it's kind of a multiple things with that. But I also just like I like playing things that are hard, so I like creating things that are a little bit difficult. Yeah, and then on the recording, so Genesis is my first album. That was my master's thesis from Berkeley. So and it's very different actually than the music I'm recording right now. That album is more of like a narrative. So if you listen to it, there's some spoken word on there. I wrote some I wouldn't necessarily call them poems, but to try to help go through it, basically is detailing my kind of my like I guess mental health journey and like just rediscovery journey after my car accident, and kind of like finding that being like, oh my gosh, I was like doing all this stuff that didn't really feel in alignment, and kind of like finding my way back to myself. So the music is kind of explorative in that way. Features mostly horn. I sing on one song, The stuff I'm recording right now is a lot more. I've been writing like depression music for the past 3 years. So I was like, I want to write like fun stuff now. So I'm doing this kind of funk fusion album, as I like to call it. So we just tracked rhythm section a couple of days ago. It was really funny, Lanette, you were talking about time. And also Alan is like, we have the click, and it's so interesting how, depending on kind of the way you've been trained or um, how you feel the beat, like you can have the same click and people can be feeling the beat in a different part of the thing. So there was like one time where we were doing one of the tunes and the drummer was really, really on the backbeat. Like he was in the pocket. Um, and it was, I was like, is he behind? And it's like, no, it's like he knows that he's hearing this click and he's intentionally putting the feeling kind of back. And so I was able to be like, hey, can we get a take where you're a bit more on the front of the beat, a bit more kind of like this pushing, kind of agitated feel? And he immediately was able to just be like, yeah, I get it. And like rhythm section players are really, I hang out with rhythm section players a lot, like bass players, drummers, guitar players, because they have to be able to adapt to so many different things. And so I'm often thinking about like I think of myself as like a bass player or a drummer. Anytime I'm writing music, I like write bass lines first. It's all groove. You'll always see, it's maybe kind of annoying to people, but I'm always like tapping my heel or like, there's some part of my body moving all the time because I have to be able to do that. So yeah, so I'm excited to hear. I have a rehearsal actually this afternoon with the orchestra. I'm recording a 19-piece orchestra. Don't ask how much it costs to cut. Well, we can maybe talk about that, but yeah, so we're doing that. We're doing a few layers. So we did rhythm, doing orchestra this weekend, and then next week I'll record with the brass trio. So I have a trumpet and trombone player joining me, and we'll be recording like some lead parts and stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
It'll be a lot of fun, but yeah, recording is it's one of my favorite things. It's super creative in a way that's not very like intuitive, but it's
Mhm.
a lot of people think recording is like cheating because you get to do it more, and it's like actually we only have 5 hours and we have to get through this much stuff, and you don't have time to mess up, and like you got to be
Yeah.
really precise, and especially like Alan was mentioning. I mean, luckily I gave people music like a couple of weeks ago and we're having this rehearsal and stuff, but a lot of times you're just showing up in the studio and laying stuff down, stuff that you're maybe sight reading or you've only had been able to run through a couple of times. So you have to be really, I will say at Berkeley when I started recording a lot, like my accuracy and my precision got really good because you just like don't have time. Like you just have to lay it down. And then you have to be able to, producers like, hey, we need this to be a little bit more like this. And then you have to be able to do it in like 1 or 2 takes. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's again kind of habiting things, right? It's like sometimes we get to habit them and awesome drop the beat things, and sometimes we just habit them because yeah, we're in that situation and we got to do it, and kind of having that ability to do it. Oh yes, I was just
Yeah,
going to
I
ask
want
if
to.
there were things like, yes, go ahead, Alan. You
No, I want to hop on. So I'm so excited to learn all the things, and Aliyah must have an incredible depth of this, more so than I do. But one of the things that when we were still on lockdown at home and during the pandemic, we were lucky enough that for a period of time they would have us start recording our own tracks at home and then having an engineer work to like put them all together, which I can only imagine like is must have been just a monumental task. It's amazing that it all worked out trying to get that, many people to learn Logic and Pro Tools and all the software, and then have it sound like something that's was, marketable. But I think that, and to Lynette's point about, pop music, I think there's an often underappreciated side of the like music world that is production, and just how like, yes, like you could call it a skill and a craft, but it's really an art in and of itself. And
yes.
even just learning the like basics of how to record yourself at home, like if anyone hasn't done that, I encourage you to, because I mean, you learn a lot. It's a fun new skill. I mean, a lot of the software seems intimidating at first because it's like it allows you to do so much that doing simple things feels hard at first, but then once you get the basics, it's not too bad. But it gave me so much more appreciation for the people we work with who are like the recording engineers. Like, but to be able to do all the things that they're able to do and to be able to do it so quickly, it's is incredible. I have an amazing amount of respect for people who are good at you know, the production side of things. And like Aliyah, like to be able to do both sides of it well is incredible because it's very, it's a very deep well of learning to be able to do that production side and do it well. And like pop music is where that stuff really shines because like all the little aspects of it that like you might not notice at first, but are like several, like many layers buried deep was all like a very purposeful decision by someone to put that there, even if you're, just listening to it in the shower. Like the amount of work and craft that went into it is often very, very cool to learn about.
Yeah, and I think, I think this is true in a lot of places these days, but I feel like again, camp is such a wonderful place for us to think about how expansive our profession really is, right? I mean, I think sometimes, especially students maybe in high school or college, really feel like, okay, if I'm going to be a musician, this is what I'm going to do. And, I'm going to be a band director, I'm going to be a orchestral musician. And there's, those are all great things to do, but sometimes many of us think, well, maybe there's some sort of mix of things, or maybe there's something outside. And yeah, production. And like you said, the fact that Aliyah can do both, be the performer and the producer. And, I just always think about the ears that people have who are producers. I mean, what you have to be able to hear it, as you said, so quickly. And, I think again, what you're hearing right here is kind of a microcosm of what happens at camp, where we start talking about all these things and thinking about all these things. And quite frankly, I can't wait till the three of you are at the dining hall together chatting, because just there's so much synergy, I think, between what all of you do. So yes, Lanette.
Well, speaking about that, since I'm new, I was really curious because like even this is fascinating, and I've known Aliyah for a long time, and just the fact that, I mean, when we're all there, how does this work on a daily basis? And I'm sure the other people who are participants have been here, or people who are new or thinking about doing this. And I'm trying to explain to some of my students who would like to go, like, what does a day look like? I saw like a sample of a day, but like I would love to be able to talk myself to all the wonderful faculty along with the students. So
yeah, and I'm going to jump in, but then I also want Alan and Aliyah to jump in too. So, I've heard camp described as Horn Heaven and Horn Boot Camp. So, and I think it's both, because the amount of things that happen and the amount of learning and community that happens in those 6 days where you're at camp, it just can't, it's hard for me as someone who's trying to, yes, share what is this experience. It's hard to summarize it, but yes, each day, so there's 6 days of instruction. Each day starts with, breakfast in the dining hall. And we are at a new venue this year at the Tilton School in Tilton, New Hampshire. So beautiful scenery. And this year our location is close to the town of Tilton. And so it's a little different. We used to be very remote, and this will have a little more kind of New Hampshire town feel. So that's nice. But so we'll start with breakfast, 7 a.m. 8 a.m. There's 2 warm-up options. So Bernard Scully, who's our artistic director, has a progressive warm-up that he kind of works people through every day, so it kind of builds on things. And then for those 6 days, 6 faculty members will do their own warm-up on those other days. So you can really pick and choose as a participant. Do I want to warm up on my own? Do I want to go to one of these? Do I want to go to this, the progressive one? Oh, wow, I want to go to Drop the Beat. And then what happens in kind of, so everything kind of moves by the hour, so 9, 10, 11. And so I think, again, one of the powerful things about camp is how it serves everyone where they are. And so what we do is we break the participants into smaller groups of maybe 4 to 6 people who are kind of similar age, similar kind of goals. And so you will move around with those people. So you'll have a master class with a faculty member, so 1 a day of those. And so you'll get to really have that. So, those of you who are listening, maybe like, oh, I get to have a master class with Lanette or Aliyah or Alan. So you work in that hour. And again, that's really kind of guided by what the people in that group want. We have Alexander Technique led by our Alexander Technique teacher, Stasia Sienna. And this is just, I think this is one of the things that really sets us apart from other music opportunities, is this focus on Alexander Technique, which is a postural technique. And it is amazing to see people work with Stasia and come out of it. And it's not just like a healthier setup for horn playing, it's like a healthier setup for your life. I mean, it's really pretty amazing. And you'll have one kind of larger group session with her and then one smaller group session with her. So that might be something that's in one of those hours. Aliyah, I'm probably going to forget some things because you do get 2 lessons per week with a faculty member. So again, I'm sure the people listening want lessons with each of you, and they are assigned. Our operations director, Julie Gerhardt, somebody asked if she had a math degree because of how she was able to put things into the schedule. Let's see, we do have, what were you going to say?
The solo coaching? I don't know what order you're going in.
Yes, I am going in the order that I've remembered. So solo coaching, and I think, one thing that is good to know about this camp is that we are always trying to make sure that what we're doing serves our participants and supports the kind of community building that that we really feel strongly about. And the solo coaching we've revamped in recent years to really make it, sometimes it just seemed a little too stressful of a situation. So now if you want to work on a solo with a faculty member, you mark that on your information sheet and you get assigned a slot. And we have 2 fantastic accompanists, collaborative pianists who are on faculty, and they learn your piece and they play it with you, and you work with a faculty member. And then if you choose, if you want to play on a recital, you can play on a recital at the end of the week, and then you have another session on that. So that's, again, some real individual attention that happens. We've also we've also kind of worked with what we do for orchestral excerpts. And so recently we've had a faculty member focus certain hours on a specific excerpt. And then we do have an evening session that is a mock audition. That's kind of fun because you can take the mock audition, but you can also just be behind the screen and kind of take in what's happening. So you can really learn from that. We do have natural horn with our natural horn specialist, Sadie Glass. And that is an hour in the late afternoon. And then we also have ensembles where usually, again, kind of your group or kind of combined with the group will do octets or things like that. And Lanette is gonna, I think, have an octet with her love of octets. I shouldn't speak for that. I don't discern that, but just hearing you say that and knowing you're, and then we have evening sessions where everyone comes together, and we do have things like faculty staff recital and the participant recitals, but we also really try to have some of those sessions be very applicable to what the participants have said they want. And so a few years ago, we presented Margaret McGilvery's, what is it called?
Lift,
yes. A compilation of solos that she commissioned from people of color to kind of fill in, again, what Aliyah was saying, like, we have Mozart for specific reasons. Well, what if we had other pieces? Last year, we had a fantastic session where Nikki Labonte interviewed faculty about failures that they'd had. And to hear the people that you think like, oh my gosh, this is this amazing horn player, they never had any issues, to hear, I mean, I think there were 7 or 8 of us, right, Aliyah, who talked about things, and people said it was one of the most powerful things they'd heard. So, again, we want to collaborate with everyone about what we do on those. So I'm not supposed to be talking this much, but I wanted to fill in a little bit about what camp is, and I hope that helps a little. And just so you know, one thing we're working on is a real participant experience page on our website so that people can see, a lot of times we get questions, is this really for me? I've just come back to playing, or I'm doing this, I'm a professional. And yes, if you ask the question, it is for you. Alan, did you want to jump in? Maybe I know camp is different than than it was when we were participants, but I think maybe just your overall take on what you get out of a week at camp.
Sure. It was interesting for me to go to camp as a high schooler and then come back maybe 5 or 6 years later, being on staff. I think one of the cool things about camp is kind of to the point that we've talked about already a few times, is that you kind of get out of it. There are lots of ways to get out of it what you would like to get out of it. So when I was a high schooler, a big part of what I enjoyed was just, I mean, being getting the chance to be around so many new teachers and new ideas and great players than I could just find in my area growing up. And there's just like so much new information, which was really cool. And being around other really good high schoolers who were like just as, let's be honest, if you're a high schooler going to French horn camp, like you're probably pretty like into French horn, right? So it's nice to just be surrounded by other people who are as nerdy about it as you are, and that's really fun. And then kind of the same thing for college. I feel like if you're seeking out this extra education, you're going to be around people who are also driven and who want to improve, but also like have a good time and support one another. And then I think the real fun, especially for the adult groups, is that you really have a lot of flexibility in what you want to get out of the program. There's we've had people who have been coming to camp for many, many years and who, love playing the horn. And really camp is like, as much as it is for the horn, it's for them to get the opportunity to see friends that they see every year at camp. And that's a really important thing and part of, when we talk about community building, like to have those relationships that have lasted for, decades because of something like horn camp, that it's much stronger or above any like accomplishment you have that year, or like whatever second movement of a Mozart concerto you played or whatever. It's all about those long-term bonds that you form. And but also like if you're an adult professional or someone who like really wants to aspire to be really serious about improvement, I can't think of any other place where you're going to be able to like pick the brains of so many people in 1 week to get so many. It can be overwhelming to get so many ideas, but like you really, everyone's very approachable. Having all the communal time is really special because it's very easy to just sit at the lunch table with whoever you want, and like everyone's a horn nerd at horn camp, so it's you're probably not going to find too many people who don't want to talk to you about horn stuff for 30 minutes at lunch. So but yeah, to Aliyah, you mentioned earlier this morning, I think, that going to IHS right after horn camp, maybe after 2 weeks of horn overload, you might want to take a break and talk about something else. But it's really cool. I think there's being around like-minded people who are curious and want to learn and have a good time and support one another. It's really, you can go and relax, and that's totally fine, and have a good time, or you can go and like really try to get as much out of you as you want out of it, and that's really great too. And there's a lot of great opportunities, and it's very conducive to that. And Lanette, one of the things that was my favorite when I was in high school were like the late night, at that time it was in the dining hall, where we'd go have like horn ensemble readings. That was like right when the London Horn Sound CD had just come out. So everyone, like, I don't remember who, but like one of the adult participants had bought like all the arrangements and brought them with them. So we would just go like read through all of them until like people made us shut up because they wanted to go to bed.
I get so
Yeah.
jealous of my students. I tell them this all the time. I'm like, because I actually combine all that. You know, Aliyah's written us something that's so killer. And so like where I get a lot of pop songs, I'll tell you a secret. One of my newest ones is the Like a Prayer by Madonna, but it's like the version that's like the choral version. So that's we just read that this week, and so I love to kind of combine those whole worlds and then incorporate the vocal stuff. But I do get jealous of my students because they get to play all the time, and I'm just waving my arms or watching somebody else rehearse them, and I'm like, so like this is what I'm talking about, getting to play too, play these horn ensembles.
Well, and I know two of the professionals who came last year ended up playing quartets with two of our faculty members every day. Like the four of them just did that. And yeah, I mean, and I'd say that, you know, exactly what Alan said. You know, I feel like, and many people have said, it's a year's worth of information in a week. And so then and I remember as a student as well, then you spend the entire year kind of working through it all. Oh, right, that's what Lanette said. Oh yeah, that makes sense now. Um, but it's all this information, but it's also in this amazingly supportive place with a wonderful community and with connections that last a lifetime. So yeah. Aliyah, did you want to say anything about information Lanette can pass on to people?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo everything that's already been said. I think a lot of my you know, the things I remember most are really like the community aspects, you know, the post concert walks and the break, you know, going down to find the lake or the where, you know, wherever we are, whatever kind of recreational things there are, like, and I don't know if John will be there this summer, but you know, looking through his telescope at like him showing us like, I don't know words. I almost said asteroid, and I know that's not correct. The constellation. But you know, different things like that. And it's like things like that. Obviously, you're going to learn about horn. And when I was there as a participant, I remember my two lessons were with Peter Corral and Lynn Baird. And my lesson with PK was I brought in the Franz Strauss concerto, and we spent the entire hour working on the first two bars. Da, na, na, na. That was it. And it was great. I was like, it was like such a great level of detail, and he's like having me think about like these are these notes in the scale and your intonation because this is the minor third, so make sure that you know, like little things like that that were really great. And just having the little you know, things like that that I'm able to take with me as I, you know, I'm working on solos, and now I'm thinking about, okay, like, yeah, I need to make sure that this line, it's all aligned. So it needs to all kind of fit together. And that was really great. So yeah, there's a wealth of someone, I just saw someone say bring a notebook. Definitely that. I had like a full half notebook of notes and thoughts and warm-ups and stuff after my week of camp. So yeah, it was really great. Really good all around experience.
Well, and I would say right now, I know we have a few more minutes to chat, but I'll get in a plug that our registration is open at horncamp.org. And I also want to say, especially for those of you who might look at it and think, wow, this looks amazing, but I just don't have the financial ability. You know, we really want to support people coming. And last year we gave a third of our participants some sort of financial assistance. And, you know, I've had students in the past, and I think Lanette has as well, who with a partial scholarship can then fundraise and, you know, or get some from school. And, you know, you can really kind of build on the scholarships that you get to make it affordable because, you know, with a 4-to-1 faculty ratio, it's going to be an expensive week. But what you get out of it is 10 times that or more. And we want to help any way we can. I mean, it's one of our big, you know, reasons for fundraising and things like that so that we can support people so that they can come. And so please, if you're considering, you know, if you want to come apply for a scholarship, and we give scholarships to all levels, you know, high school, college, adult. So please consider it. And we ask you to play 5 minutes of music that shows us what you do. So that's what we ask. And then various, you know, recommendations and things like that. But that's due on March 1st. And so if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to me at Peggy at Horncamp. But just know we want you to be able to come. So please apply.
Are there any other, I know Joe had asked in the chat if anyone had any questions for us. it's okay if not, but I wanted to open the floor, so.
And I would say, yes, please, please put something in the chat if you have questions for any of us. Please also always reach out. You can tell all of these people are wanting to, again, to have all horn players as part of our community. And so, so if you think of something later, just reach out to us. But I just have to say how excited I am to have the three of you on faculty this year. Again, let's see, which weeks are you there? So, okay. So, so Aliyah's there week 2, Lanette and Alan are there week 1. Again, we have 14 faculty per week, 50 participants. So you get a lot of time. You get to hang out with these people. They are absolutely fantastic, as you can see, and it has just made my day to get to connect with all of you. And I don't know, why don't we have, anybody want to have a final thought from the three of you? Lanette.
I just want to say that even
Go ahead.
Sorry, we can all
Yeah.
during this time, it was like maybe 10 minutes into this whole session that I realized I felt healthier than I have in about 4 weeks. And I was like, wow, I've been really sick, like actually physically sick for a while. And I was like, man, like I'm already like my cheeks and in the middle, I don't know if you saw me do this, but my cheeks started to hurt in the middle of this. But I can't even imagine how much this will be good for my brain, but specifically my soul. And I'm really taking a lot of time to pay attention to the things that are really great in my life. And Horn has helped, I think, most of us get through a lot of things. And can you just imagine the community and being with everybody, sharing something that we can all be so thankful for. And so I just want to thank all of you guys for everything that you do and for everything, the connections that we've already had. And this has just been pretty fantastic. And so thank you all for being you. And I can't wait to hang out with a bunch of other horn players and meet some people. So thank
And just so you know, New Hampshire generally is much nicer in June than Oklahoma. Alan,
you. That. It's a little toasty here in June.
Alan, go ahead.
Oh no, I couldn't think of a better send off than that. So thanks, Lanette.
Any last words, Aliyah, before Joe takes over?
Yeah, no, I don't want to ruin it. I think we're
Lanette, Lanette, you covered it for all of us. Thank you all who joined us today, and I hope, and hello to anyone who watches this later on our YouTube page. And take it away, Joe.
Yes, so warm thank you to all of our faculty and executive director. So as Peggy just said, this will be put up on our YouTube channel later on this week. And please reach out if you have any questions about camp, anything you've heard today, or just want to say hello to anybody. But yes, thank you for coming. I hope you've enjoyed our February installment of our Horn Camp Connect. And we hope to see you soon. And thanks again for supporting the camp and Cormont music. Have a good one.